Let me take this opportunity, first of all, to welcome you all to this function, and also thank you for having answered our invitation to come and participate this afternoon. My name is Hassan Hafid Saleh. I'm the chairman, Board of Trustees of Al-HIDAAYA Foundation, and I'm also a lecturer in the Islamic University in Uganda. My task is really a simple task of only introducing to you Al-HIDAAYA Foundation. I believe most of you already know Al-HIDAAYA Foundation. Al-HIDAAYA Foundation is a Dawah and humanitarian organization that was registered in the year 2002 as a company limited by guarantee. Since then, the foundation has played a leading role in Uganda's Dawah work, involving students, youth, Muslim families, and the general public. Our vision as Al-HIDAAYA Foundation is to establish a vibrant Muslim society in Uganda. And our mission is to be a platform for organizing, empowering, and performing missionary and humanitarian work for the purpose of building a progressive Muslim society in Uganda. So as to achieve that mission, we have various objectives. One of them being to spread the message of Islam through preaching and defending it from falsehoods and doubt. Secondly, to raise the socio-economic status of Muslims through education, health, community service, and beneficial skills. Thirdly, to foster social justice and well-being of society through alleviating ignorance, poverty, and moral decay, in addition to promoting charitable work regardless of race and religion. Those are some objectives. There are also many others, but in the interest of time, I will not be going so much into detail. However, I would like also to inform you that Al-HIDAAYA, in carrying out those, in order to achieve those objectives, we carry out various activities, and these activities are sort of split into various departments. So we have 6 departments actually in our organization. One of the departments is that one dealing with students' affairs. Okay? Maybe if we have the heads of those departments here already, you may also stand up so that you can be recognized. That is, we have a Department of Students' Affairs. Is the head here? Students' Affairs Department. Al-Hajj Musa Abbas Katende. We have a Families Department. Families Department head, are you around? Families Department Head, not around, not yet here. Then we have a Department of Media, Research and Community Outreach. Media, Research and Community Outreach. The head is there, Brother Ashraf Migadde. He can say salam. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Then we also have a Department of Business and Finance. Business and Finance, the head is still on the way coming. Then we have a Department of Planning and Capacity Development. Planning and Capacity Development, that is also another department we have. And then we have a Department of Women's Affairs. Women's Affairs, I think the head is here. I saw her somewhere. Head of Women's Department, Sister Zaitun Nakadu, can say salam. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. So those are the 6 departments under which we carry out our various activities. And I think really when you look at our function today, it is in line with those various departments we have. Of course, we have a website. You shall be getting this information as we move on. We have a website. We have our secretariat, and so on and so forth. You'll be getting more of that information. Let me maybe just end also by introducing some of the board members. Some of the board members of Al-HIDAAYA Foundation. We have Alhaji Sinan Siraj Mbulambago, who is our moderator today.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have Mr. Kaga Abdul Karim. He's also a board member of Al-HIDAAYA. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We also have Alhaji Musa Abbas Katende. He's also here, board member. Other board members are still on their way, and you shall be seeing them as we go on. But one of them is Professor Kalema Chiwewa. We also have the vice chairman of the board is Mr. Sekalema Hamza. Then we also have others, as you shall be knowing, inshallah ta'ala. So in the interest of time, as you know you have limited time, let me end here, but let me take this opportunity again of welcoming all of you to this function, and also welcoming our presenters and guests, and we hope that you have a nice time here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We thank him, Brother Hafiz.
Can you hear me? Sinan, can you hear me?
Yes, we do. We do hear you, but we have not yet seen you.
It looks like the IT people have not enabled me to start my video.
Okay, we can start in the meantime as they enable the video, inshallah.
Yeah, so, but I'm here, I'm with you, I've been listening since the beginning. And should I wait for the video to be showed, or I can get into the conversation?
I think in the interest of time, we may start as the IT guys are trying to fix that.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings from Europe.
Dr. Yusuf, I'm told you should enable your video. Just click on the video such that people should be able to see you. Yes, we recognize the arrival of our senior Brother Al-Hajj Muhammad Manja Chivirige with the team. He's also a member of Ummiyah. Yes, I think there we are. Tafaddal, Doctor. Dr. Yusuf, the floor is yours. Now we can see you very well.
Thank you very much, Brother Sinan. Greetings from Europe. I should say it's unfortunate I'm not in Kampala to share the floor with Imam Kasozi, Professor Baschimba, and the other distinguished speakers of this afternoon, but I'm greatly honored to be joining you in this conversation. I think all of us as humans and as Muslims, we share in the plight of Palestine. So I am very, very happy to be speaking. And to get straight into the conversation, I want to do three things, basically. First, I need to say that I'm not a historian. I'm not a historian of Palestine. The history of the region is very complex, especially when you come into the small detail. It's very complex and very controversial, and with lots of interest pooling in different sides. But I'll speak to the basic history, which I think some of us are very familiar with, but I will spell out sort of an overview and provide a frame in which we need to think about Palestine. So I'll do three things that I'll do. First, I'll talk about colonial history, basically. I want to propose to you that we need to think about Palestine in this context as any other part of the world which was under colonialism, right? And I need to say that the colonial history that Uganda got independence in 1962, colonial history across the world is a history of settlements. There were theories that developed, I think, in the 1700s in Europe, mostly in Germany, that for Europeans to live a decent life, they had to move parts of their populations into other parts of the world, right? So that is the history that we have. So if you remember, those who read African history, you remember the Boers and the British settled in South Africa. And to settle in South Africa, they had to kill so many people. That's how they ended up settling in South Africa. In fact, if you have been to Cape Town, I don't know if you who have been to Cape Town. If you have been to Cape Town on a good day, and you're looking around the coast, the Cape. Excuse me, somebody is speaking in the... Can I carry on?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay. So the point I was making, that if you have lived to Cape Town, for example, you realize that that place is predominantly settled by white settlers who have now become natives through different generations. But that place is predominantly settled by white settlers, mostly British and Boers, from the Netherlands, from Germany, from the UK. So they settled that place, but to settle that place, they had to chase away the natives. And they were not simply chasing them away the way you chase rubbish, the way you clean up a place, they were actually killing them. So if you remember the Boer Wars, remember the Zulu Wars, those were wars where native South Africans were fighting against the settlers. So that's the earliest example you can talk about of settler colonialism. So you have South Africa being settled. What I also find really fascinating about South Africa is that we even call it South Africa, which is an English language word. We don't use, say, Zululand, for example. You would have a different word which is native to the land, but to show you that South Africa is a history of settlement, you call it South Africa, which is a word in English. I don't think that native South Africans called their country South Africa, called the space in which they lived South Africa. Not far from South Africa, you'll go to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, we've had, for those who have been following, I think in 2005, we had big debates on how people within Mugabe's party, those who had fought with him during the colonial time, were forcibly getting land back from the white farmers. Now you need to remember that Zimbabwe was even called Rhodesia after a man called Cecil Rhodes, who was the biggest conqueror. In South Africa, rather Zimbabwe, is also occupied, was settled by white settlers from the UK, who settled in that space called Zimbabwe now. Now the Zimbabweans were lucky that they were even able to change the name from Southern Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. The South Africans were not as lucky, so they still go around as South Africa. So you need to understand in the context that the white settlers kicked people off the land by killing them. It is estimated that close to 1 million people have died during these wars of land settlement. And as you know, 3% of the population in Zimbabwe is white, and they own almost half of the country in terms of land. So you have about 900 white settlers, farmers, who own huge chunks of land in Zimbabwe. So again, I'm talking about colonialism being a history of settlement. So South Africa was settled by white farmers, rather by white settlers from Netherlands, from the UK, from Germany. Not far away from that place, we have Zimbabwe, which has been settled by settlers. All right? But maybe that is even further. You need to come here to Kenya, our neighbors here in Kenya. Kenya was also a settler colony. It was also settled by British settlers. So they came into land. And to take land, they had to kill people. Okay, so Uganda in this context is lucky that we were a protectorate. But countries which were designated as settler spaces, they will be settled by European populations. So you have Kenya at the same time. Now, when we start talking about genocides, we have Namibia, right? The Namibia genocide. The German government, not too long ago, about 3 years ago, agreed to pay compensation to the Nama and Hero, who were massacred, who were exterminated by the Germans so that they can settle German populations. So you have Namibia, where a country of, I think, about 4 million people, and the white settlers, the German settlers, formed 2% of the Namibian population. They formed 2%, but the 2% own 70% of the land in Namibia. They own 70% of the land in Namibia, a 2% of population, and they are all seated on land which was acquired through extermination of the native population. So we could have so many examples, right? We could talk about Algeria. Algeria was also settled by French nationals. We could go further. We could go to Brazil. Brazil was settled by. We could go to Argentina. We could go to all across the world. We have a history of colonial settlers. White people believed that for them to live a decent life, they have to go further afield, find places which they thought were inhabited. They found people who were living in those places, and they killed people and settled in those places. So that's the first history that we need to think about. And if you run your mind through that, then you come to Palestine. Palestine is also settled in the same context of white colonial settlements. So, Europeans at the same time. 1948, they feel like they need to move a European population onto another piece of land. Right? Now, the difference here with Palestine specifically is that we are in the context of the Second World War. The Second World War ended and Hitler killed people specifically identified as Jews. So it was a genocide where it was marked Jews had to be killed. I don't want to go into the history of why the genocide happened, the Holocaust happened in Germany. I think that will take us further away from the context of our conversation, because I want to stick to simply the contention that this is European colonial settlement. Europeans, because anti-Semitism is, I don't know if we need to talk about anti-Semitism now, that the hatred for Jews, for people identifying as Jews, is very widespread in European society. It's extremely widespread that to this day, almost across Europe, including the United States, they still have big movements against anti-Jewish hatred, something they call anti-Semitism. It's so widespread in Europe. So they felt they needed space elsewhere where the Jews would be safe. That's what they said, because they were unsafe in Europe. Maybe they're even unsafe even today. And they were looking for places where they can settle them. But I need to make the point again that we're here dealing with European settler colonialism, that you can settle a section of your population elsewhere away from Europe. So we have a population that we don't like, the Jews, but we share sort of a relationship with them because, they were our bankers, because Europeans were not allowed, or rather Catholics then were not allowed to own banks. So you have to settle this population somewhere. So plenty of spaces were suggested, including, as most of us know, including Uganda. Well, it wasn't really Uganda, including a part of East Africa. Okay, but also you need to remember that when East Africa is being colonized, and I think Professor Lwangali Nyugo made this point in a book that he put out recently, when East Africa was being colonized, the British colonial officers wanted to donate East Africa to Indians, thanking them as gratitude, as a token of their appreciation for the support Indian fighters were giving to British fighters in the Middle East and other places. So the idea was to give East Africa to Indians. This is why you have British colonialism in East Africa you have the British on top, but underneath the British governance, you had the Indians as intermediaries. And this is why the Ugandan, before 1972, you had Indians sort of in charge of the Ugandan economy. It wasn't by accident. It was a deliberate policy by the colonial governors when British colonialism started in Uganda. So Uganda was suggested to be given to the Indians, but the British colonial government in London didn't agree to do that. They instead said, no, we can't donate territory to Indians. But then, when the Palestine question emerges, when the Jewish question emerges in Europe, among the other places that were considered again were parts of East Africa for Jewish identifying people in Europe is settled in Uganda. Parts of Latin America were suggested too. Other places were suggested, including, I think in Madagascar, was suggested, this was on the table, where should we settle these people who are unsafe in Europe? Now, later, I'm not sure about the history, but Palestine somehow gets onto the table, and finally it is Palestine that is selected. And so Palestine, the argument was easily made, because you could say the Jews had been living in Palestine and had been settled in Palestine, but before the population started moving, so Palestine could be called their homeland. So this is how, huge numbers of Jewish identifying Europeans are moved into Palestine. Again, the point I'm trying to make here is that this is a settler colonial mindset. The way British have been settling their populations across the map, the way the French had done the same, the way parts of Britain, parts of many people from across Europe had moved into the Americas, killed people there and settled America, right? So the point I want to stress here, which I don't want us to lose, because many times we lose it, that we're seeing the mindset in Europe at the time is of moving populations and settling them elsewhere. The difference here is that Palestine happens quite later in the history of settlements. Quite later, when around this time, India had already gotten independence. Around this time, after the Second World War, many countries across the globe, which were still colonial enclaves, were thinking about becoming independent. The independence was starting to be debated, right? After the defeat of Germany, after the defeat of the Axis powers, you have a movement which is strongly pro-independence across, but the transition had to be managed. It is late in the throes of colonialism that Jews are also settled in Palestine. So I want to leave that there, because now I don't want to go into discussing which borders are agreed upon, which convention should be had, because this is quite well known, and I think we should be content by stopping at the understanding that we have a settler colonial state seated on other people's land. And so that part should be understood, that it doesn't help matters very much when we, especially for us located in Uganda, if we start to go into which borders, which agreement. Okay, I think let's leave it there as a bit of history, that Europe driving on a mindset of settling European populations into other people's lands, they settled Jews in Palestine, and because successfully to this day, they settled many white people, many Europeans in other parts of the world, successfully. So my contention actually right now is that I think they still believe they can succeed in settling a population on the all of that space which is we call Palestine, right? Because they established the state of Israel underscores partial success. But then I'll talk about how the movement has even become stronger, that you can take over the entirety of that place which is called Palestine. That's the first thing I wanted to do. The second thing I want to do is to push an argument. I want to push an argument that we are dealing with a war of resources. We are dealing with resources. That when we talk about colonialism, we tend to see some sort of culture, some sort of, it has become so cliche that we lose what is at stake. What is normally at stake is land. Land as a resource. Land as a resource. You need to bear in mind that in Europe is very unfortunate, extremely unfortunate, that in terms of food, they are so handicapped. Europe is so handicapped in terms of food because they can't grow their food. And there are too many people in Europe, too many people. In fact, when you see programs across Africa calling for family planning, those projects have to be here. They have to be in Europe. Europe has to run serious family planning projects. But they are so unfortunate in the context that when the sun shines, it is too hot. When it gets too cold, it is extremely cold. That these temperatures don't support farming. This is why about 70% of the things that are consumed in Europe come from the rest of the world. They are not grown in Europe. So they are so unfortunate in that context that they have to find food elsewhere, and they have to find food cheaply.
Doctor,
right?
we are
So
almost halfway our time, Doctor. We are
halfway,
almost
10 minutes?
8.
8.
To be
this
precise.
Is good.
Okay.
It's good time. So I'm just saying, the point I'm trying to push an argument which I think is a good way of debating Palestine and understanding Palestine is that we are working on a contention of resources. And resources in material terms, not resources as far-flung ideas, but in actual terms, such as land. Land is a core thing in the colonial franchise because you need land for agriculture. 70% of landowners in Namibia grow food which they sell to Europe. Same with the white farmers in Zimbabwe. Same with farmers in South Africa. Same with the farmers in Latin America. You know, when we talk about, for example, land expropriation in Brazil, where huge chunks of the Amazon are being burned down because they want to grow food to feed Europeans. Okay? They need to understand, for example, they need to have animals. They have to rear animals to get meat into Europe. You might not know the statistic, but I find it really fascinating that I think Africans need to know that the average meat consumption in Africa, a normal human being, an average meat consumer in Africa, if you take Kenya as the example, eats meat a year. Well, I think some people in the audience here maybe eat much more, but the average is 17 kgs. Now, in Europe, the average is 127 kilograms. That's the average meat consumption in Europe. Now, this is in Europe and North America. Now, if this is the average meat consumption, where do these animals come from? Where does the meat come from? It has to come from Brazil. So the point I'm trying to make here is that we have a contention over resources, food, minerals, access to the sea, etc. So those are the core contentions on the ground. So when you look at Palestine, for example, right now, why does Israel, are they not content to have the territory that they have that now they're pushing to have the entirety of it by ethnic cleansing and genocide. Why do they want to have all of it? You have to go back to resources. What is at stake in the Palestinian spaces? What is at stake? There's access to the sea, there is access to natural gas, there is the project, which is still being debated at some points, is still sounding like gossip. The construction of the Ben Gurion Canal, which has to compete with the Suez Canal. Okay, I cannot show the map, but I want people to be familiar. I don't know if we have a chance to show the map, other discussants, that is the Suez Canal, which is the connection between the seas going through Egypt. You can build a Ben Gurion Canal, which I think will be a marvel in human history if they were ever able to build the Ben Gurion Canal, which has to go through the place called Gaza, right? But before I stretch the point of the Ben Gurion Canal, I want to argue that we are dealing with resources, that the place called Gaza does not only provide land, but also provides access to the sea with other possibilities in mining in natural gas, which have already been found in this space. So this is the major contention we are facing with. And this is going to be my final point, which I want to impress onto my listeners this afternoon, is that it's the opposite of the second point I've been pushing, that we're fighting over resources. I want to say that we're not dealing with a religious war. Okay, as Muslims, this is not a war of religion. And I think the more we push, the more we make this understandable to all of us, I think it's better as to level the ground of the contention. Because Europe has been persuaded to believe that, Muslims in Palestine don't like the Jews. That, for long, Muslims and Jews have been at war with each other. Even when news breaks that, they're actually Christians in Palestine, they're Christians in Gaza, they are Jews who live in Gaza, many people in Europe don't seem to be shocked. There are actually Christians living in Gaza, there are Jews living in Gaza, and they're Palestinians, and they're so-called God Allah. The point I'm trying to stretch here, which I think sometimes gets, because we are Muslims and they are Muslims, and we, as the Ummah, we feel each other's pain, and we feel that we should be together as the Ummah, we tend to, all of us, see this as a religious war. And I think that's very problematic. This is a colonial war. Because as the Sheikh, I forget his name, but I think one of my panelists could remind me, who has consistently argued that even if you're a fellow Muslim trying to come and steal my property, to take away my private property, such as land, I will still be in arms against this Muslim. What we're dealing with right now is not a religious war. We need to understand the frames of this conversation, because the enemy would like to persuade the world that this is a religious war. It's Muslims against Jews. So whenever you find somebody identifying as a Muslim, they have to be aligned with the Palestine because it's Muslims against the Jews. No, it's not. It's Muslims against the occupying state of Israel. Muslims and Jews have lived for years together in absolute harmony. And if you go back to the history of the formation of Israel, because you have the demographic contention, you have to have numbers so as to build a state. You have to have numbers. You have to have people. Palestine together is about 6 million, if I'm not mistaken. Now, this number rivals the number of people who live in Israel. So you have to have numbers. So what the Israel state has done for over a long period is, in its formation, is to go across the world encouraging people to move into Palestine, to move into Israel, encouraging Jews to come into Israel. In fact, one of the interesting stories that in the 1990s, many South Africans were converting to the Jewish religion, which I think is a very exclusive religion, but they were identifying as Jews so that they can be settled within Israel, because they need the numbers, right? But the point I want to make here is that the Jews who lived elsewhere in Iraq, in Syria, in the Muslim majority countries, were living a very beautiful and harmonious relationship with the other religious communities in there, that there was no war between Jews and Muslims in Syria and in Iraq. There was no conflict. But conflict had to be manufactured so that they can be forced into Israel, so that they can have a huge demographic. Right? So 3 things I wanted to stress as I wind up, Brother Sinan, is that we need to often learn to frame this into the question of colonialism, where the European mindset is convinced they can all go over, kill the native populations, and occupy that space. And the second point I wanted to stress is that, we're dealing with a resource war. Yes, resources basically. And now we need to understand there's just at stake that has forced Israelis not to be content with the small space that they are, not small space, the huge chunk of land they already occupy, to want to force every single Palestinian out of Gaza, right? The debates, as I think many of my other panelists will talk about, the intention to bribe Egypt into opening its borders, to take over all these Palestinians, the normal talking point. Why are the other Muslim countries not taking these populations? Why do they want to take them? Because this is their land. So we are in a context of a resource war: land, minerals, food, access to the sea, natural gas, and oil, and etc. But then also, finally, it's not a religious war. It's not Muslims against the Jews. It is an occupier against an occupier. It is the Maji rebellion. This is the Zulu war. Unfortunately, we don't have a story for Uganda, but the easiest to think about the contention in Palestine and Gaza is that you're looking at the Maji rebellion, we're looking at the Zulu wars, we're looking at the Nama hero fighting their occupiers. It's wars against settlement. It's war against a colonial force. And I think on that note, I'll stop here, Brother Sinan, and give the mic back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, moderator, the organizers of this important debate or discussion, eminent scholars, leaders, student leaders, the concerned people of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allow me to first apologize. When I was invited to speak, it was not specifically made to me that I would be speaking specifically on the effectiveness, although it's one of the aspects that I intended to address. Allow me again to first make a comment to thank first Doctor for the wonderful presentation he has made, because he has tried to do justice in terms of painting the historical context and broadening our outlook. However, before I go into my presentation, I have issues, and I think Dr. hinted on it. I have issues on the topic as framed, because the topic as framed says the Israeli genocide in Palestine. You see, that topic is also confining us in the predefined mode of thinking that the genocide that is going on in Palestine is actually a perpetuation of only the state of Israel as is. Because the moment you go and take that route, then you let those who are actually the architect of the genocide scot-free, both legally and morally. And I think, as organizers, my thinking was, I think it is not an issue of Israel. There are a number of, so that title has framed, and it has been part of the Western philosophy. And I think a doctor hinted on it about Jews, Palestine, Muslims. But when you look at this problem, it is actually obscuring. When you frame it that way, you are obscuring the responsibility, the legal responsibility of the ongoing genocide that has been there since 1948. Because people have also tried to limit it to what happened on 7th October and then subsequently. This has been an ongoing process. So there are many culpable states, individuals, actors, corporate entities. And therefore, we must have a discussion if we are going to resolve that genocide in its broader sense. It is therefore absolutely necessary for us and for the world to start targeting all the actors that are enabling this genocide to persist and continue. If we don't, and we still focus on Israel as a state, only as a culprit, this genocide will continue. So I thought I should make those comments. One would ask, who are these actors? You need to know that Israel as a state was established post the Second World War by the victors as part of the New World Order. And they declared a state called Israel. But in the same vein, they did not declare a state called Palestine. So from that day, they rendered a population stateless, which at that time and up to now is a crime under international law. It's a violation of human rights to render an individual, a group of people, stateless. But the action taken in 1948 to establish the Israeli state, the Jewish state, actually, they didn't. Because if they were interested in justice, they would have said, okay, there is a state of Israel, there is a state of Palestine. But from 1948, the issue of whether Palestine is a state or not was supposed to be an issue of discussion and agreement. But there was no discussion and agreement on the state called Israel. So you see, that is the foundation, and that's how we must start to look at this genocide. Because its roots were laid there. And this violence you see, which Israel claimed to be responding to, the seeds were planted there. No human being worth his name or her name will accept to be subjugated, to be rendered stateless. So they are actors. You have institutions like the Security Council with permanent members who abuse their veto power to stop any action to be taken, because the new international order that was put in place after the Second World War established some organs. But the most important organ that can cause crimes of this nature not to be perpetuated is the Security Council, because it has the coercive element. You have the ICJ, the court system. Those ones do not have the capacity to enforce international law. The only institution under the international legal order that can enforce international law is the Security Council. Now, if those who established the state of Israel, which is perpetuating not only genocide, it started with apartheid. I think Dr. Serunkuma explained it when he was talking about South Africa, the Boers, and what happened. They have committed all crimes on the statute book against human rights in Palestine since 1948. But the only institution that can and could prevail is the Security Council. So you have members there of the Security Council, the US and its allies. Whenever an issue arises, crimes are being committed, and therefore the Security Council is required to take action, they veto any decision to be taken, and the matter ends there. So when you frame the genocide, moderator, to be an Israeli issue, when they are enablers in some other capitals, I think we are falling into a trap. We need to re-engineer the debate. Who are the actual perpetrators of this genocide? They are military, economic, and political supporters Without those ones, Israel would not be able to commit these crimes and got scot-free. These ones have vested interest in the Middle East, and I think Dr. Has tried to explain, to paint that picture, what is it that actually people are fighting for. I want to expand that beyond the minerals, the resources. They are political interests. And I think I have been thinking for quite some time. Maybe that is why the framing of the state of Israel did not have a corresponding state of Palestine. The resources were in the Middle East, and you needed to control them. To control those resources, you needed to control its leadership. To control the leadership in the Middle East, you need to create a mismatch between the citizens of those countries and the leaders. And how do you create that mismatch? By creating a problem where you are forcing to create a kind of a conflict that is perpetual, which has the potential of affecting the leadership potential in those regions. So you appear to be a guardian of security in the region. So these leaders, they are holding to your support. So when Israel does anything, they can't respond appropriately. If they cannot respond, then the population in those areas, in those countries, is actually agitating for action. So there is a disagreement between the population and the leadership. So that means the more the leadership is unable to rely on its people, on its citizens to govern, then it must rely on foreign force, which can only be rendered by the same architects of the Israeli state. So those vested interests of continuing to control the flow of oil in the Middle East, Saudi, and all other countries actually lays the foundation, in my view, for what we are witnessing and what we are yet to witness, because this is not the end. It is just, I think, a start of another phase. So, as a commentary to the topic, I think on another day, we need to have a broader look at those who are guilty of this crime. Restricting it to the state of Israel is playing in the hands of those who have been perpetuating it. Now, Dr. has given a context of the establishment of the Jewish state and why Palestine and why the fighting is there. I wanted to summarize the context of this genocide. You see, the state of Israel was established in 1948. And there was a denial, as I said, of a Palestinian state. Now, with that came with the statelessness of the Palestinian people. And from that time, we've had an incremental and deliberate, intentional support of Israeli activities contrary to international law by both the US and its European partners. Now, around the same time, 1948, the Genocide Convention, or the Convention for Punishment, Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, was enacted in 1948. The question is, was it intended to be a legal instrument to protect all people, or it was intended to protect the Jews that were being resettled in a new state that had been established? Why am I posing this question, and the academians in this gathering and globally can try to investigate that? This convention is unique in its way. When it was established, initially it was to exist for 10 years, and perpetually it's being extended for 5 years, by default, because unless if some people withdraw from it. I think those who had established the state of Israel They needed a legal instrument which had emerged after the Second World War. Those of students of international law and students of international diplomacy, you know, the Nuremberg trials in Germany, when they are trying the Nazi political leaders and military officers for the Holocaust. The question was, they could only try issues connected to offenses committed during the war, because that was the state of the law at the time. Now, the promoters of this convention was actually a Jewish Polish lawyer who was the brain behind this convention. He was aggrieved that the Nuremberg trials, the tribunal, could not address crimes that had been committed against the Jews before the war. That's why this has an element of crime whether committed during the war or during peace. So for that reason, when you were analyzing the effectiveness of the international legal order in enforcing the law of genocide, this genocide convention, you need to see it from that perspective. And that's why you've not seen it being forcefully enforced when we had the Muslim Serbs being exterminated. Yugoslavia, you all know. You know it when the Rohingya Muslims happened, because the enactors, the promoters of this convention never conceptualized that it was intended to protect other people other than the silent group of people. And those are the Jews. So when you do something against them, then the convention will be activated. It is there. But they didn't have to say it in black and white. But by their conduct, since 1948, I think we can be able to see that. Now, this convention came into force in 1951, and many crimes have been committed of this nature. And we can be sure, those of you who followed the proceedings in the South African case against Israel, the evidence they are laying before court, this is not evidence you've gathered by yourself, by international organs of the UN, civil society organizations. Whether or not ultimately the ICJ finds the state of Israel guilty, every one of us who is capable of reading and analyzing can know that Israel and its supporters have committed all the elements under the Genocide Convention. Because the Genocide Convention, as you know it, it does define genocide as any act committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. And that brings me to what the doctor was discussing. Are they intending, are they just fighting? Or they are intending to destroy, to wipe out the Palestinians, reduce them to a level that is so insignificant that their existence cannot even be fit to be noted as a footnote in a paragraph. My thinking is that that is the purpose. Why? You remember in 1995, the agreement, this two-state solution had been reached, the agreement signed, and it was about implementation, the accord, Oslo Accord. What happened? The Prime Minister who had appended the signature and approved that accord was assassinated. You and me and those who have bothered to read, you know which state, which country has been at the center of assassinating foreign leaders who do not pursue their foreign interests. I think CIA has been, it's recorded. You don't find any serious investigation and attempt to punish all those ones. Someone wants to tell you that one individual woke up to kill a prime minister and that is it. So we've had this two-state solution as a public relation, but without the intention of having it established. Now someone appends the signature, the next day is dead. Therefore, that is the debate that you start from there, and the context in which you must discuss the effectiveness of enforcing this legal regime of genocide. Killing members of the group, I think Palestinians have been killed beyond counting. I don't think we have actual statistics of those who have been killed. Causing serious bodily harm and mental harm. Is there anyone in doubt that the Palestinians are suffering serious bodily harm and mental harm? Psychologically, they are tortured. Deliberately inflicting conditions that are calculated to bring about physical destruction of a whole or a part of the population. When you place a permanent prison, a siege of a population concentrated in a small enclave for not 2 years, not 5, but even you prevent aid to go in. You control the air, you control the land, you control even what they breathe, the water they drink, the electricity. Are you not? So the purpose is simply to annihilate, to cause a complete destruction of the Palestinian people. So the issue of whether we have a genocide on our hand that has been on for the last 75 years is not in doubt. The question is, how do we enforce it? How effective is it? It can't be effective. Why? Because the genocide that is prohibited under the convention, the conspiracy to commit genocide, the direct public incitement, the attempt to commit, the complicity to commit genocide, as defined in the Genocide Convention, affect states that are directly responsible for enforcing the international legal order. Which are these states? United States for a start, European Union, who provide backing, support, unquestioned support. You see, when Israel started killing, this current killing, what did America do? They moved in their warships to inflict a psychological blow to these people, not to fight anybody. So for that reason, what do I suggest that can happen if we are going to make this legal framework work and be effective? All of us, one, it depends on the effectiveness of the global institutions, particularly the Security Council. Until you have a reform in the Security Council, either removing the veto or putting some numbers that if so many members of the Security Council have decided action to be taken, then the veto will not work. You will not enforce this legal order. The intergovernmental or regional blocks, like we had NAM, we had the G77 plus China, you have the Arab League, you have African Union. If we are able to, if those blocks can mobilize themselves minus the Security Council, cause political and economic impact on Israel and its backers, then probably we can have this law very effective. We will stop this genocide. Individual state, the good thing for the first time, we've got this evidence on record over a public international institution, the ICJ. So therefore, individual states, we know since that order was made for temporary measures, Israel has not complied. Actually, the European Union and others just went ahead and withdrew funding for some NGOs, if you've been following, providing aid. So what does that mean? That the intention is not, even if ICJ ruled, even in the face of those interim measures, even if ICJ ruled tomorrow that Israel is committing genocide, nobody among those who are currently empowered to take action has the ability or the will the legal, moral, and political will to enforce the Genocide Convention against the Jews. For that reason, you need state parties, the same way South Africa did in this case, the same way Gambia did in the case of the Rohingya Muslims. We need to encourage individual states to take actions, state action against these states, both the Israeli states and its supporters. Also, the collective actions of the global citizenry. Because if we all, for example, boycotted products not only from Israel, but even from those countries that have decided to pay lip service or turn a blind eye to this human catastrophe, probably it will change the calculus. Without that, the enablers of Israel will continue to support the Jewish state. The people will dissipate, and what will happen after they have reduced the Palestinians to an insignificant population, they will say that the concept of a two-state solution is no longer viable. Circumstances on the ground have changed irreversibly. So let's have one state where all are citizens. But after they have rendered you insignificant, that you cannot cause political change in the state called Israel. I think that is the ultimate end. And that is what we have to fight to stop, collectively as global citizens. Thank you, moderators. Thank you, members, for listening to me.
Wow.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
I liked in a more deeper understanding. We thank you, Council, for that insight. And I do believe your time you spent coming in here is not in vain, but like we did say that this is a human rights issue. It's a humanity aspect where an entire, population is being dismantled. So, like he said, Israel is not alone. If it were not for its backers, probably it wouldn't have committed the crimes it is committing. In fact, even in terms of the resources, in all aspects, whether maritally, talking about the Iron Dome, talking about the psychological backup by the warships he has mentioned, and also being the major funders to the so-called international organs, including the ICJ. I mean, it has just ignored. Just imagine how somebody was making an analogy with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the sanctions that were, put on Russia, right, left, and center, the noise, the propaganda. Now, I mean, when it comes to the Palestinians, it's quite a different thing because they have interest in there. We will be making Salat al-Asr to be a little bit later than what we had.
Everybody, I need to first apologize. When I was called yesterday to stand in for Professor Kimba, I was okay. But 3 hours later, I felt sick. I was admitted overnight, but I said, okay, let me do online. I couldn't drive to Kampala. Let me do it online, and here we are. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Thumma salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I want to thank the audience, the organizers, for giving me this opportunity to say a few words to share in this conversation about a subject that is so passionate. I'm so passionate about. My approach is going to be a little highlighting actually many of the things that people have been just saying. But I want to look at the perspective of what is happening in the Gaza in light of the humanitarian aid. Not straight away, because humanitarian aid is necessary and everybody should be knowing that. There's no issue debate whether people want water, whether people should have medicine, whether people should have, electricity or something like that. But I want to first make a statement. We are dealing with a civilization issue. We are dealing with a big-time civilizational issue. I am a student of, comparative civilizations, basically the Islamic, the African, and the Western. That's my area of interest in all my research and my writings. But I have come to understand to come to terms with Western civilization with 5 characteristics, which I want to first give before I go into the nitty-gritty of the humanitarian aid, which is rather obvious. 5 characteristics do, single out the Western civilization apart from the African and the Islamic. Number 1, it's a violent civilization. When I say the Western, I'm talking about all the way from America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, all over, Europeans, wherever they are. Why? Because it's obvious. I mean, many of you might remember, it is the only civilization that has sponsored 2 world wars. That's violence. It is the only civilization that has, created weapons of mass destruction. It is surviving or thriving on a military industrial complex, which determines or, which influences major public policy. So they are very violent. They're the only civilization that has sponsored holocausts. The Germans, the Europeans, they taunted, they haunted, they tortured the Israelites that we're talking about now. It's only them. All right? It is a civilization that has thrown a nuclear bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So that's one thing. Let's be clear. So when we're talking about violence and controlling violence, we know who they are we're talking about. And by the way, Israel is a representative of the Western civilization, the Greco-Roman, Judeo-Christian tradition in the Middle East. So that's one fact that we need to know before we go into analyzing whether it's going to be able to apply the law, whether it's going to be able to have a historical context to help. Number 2, it is a deceptive civilization. It's built on lies. The Western civilization, I mean, through their media, propaganda, they tell so many lies. And I'm happy this time around because when I go to watch what's happening all over the world, the movement that is, pro-Palestine demonstrations and mobilization, what are we doing? What are we using? Not the formal, Western media, which is full of lies. It is social media where no editing is done. So it's deceit. I'm telling you, people in Israel, as we speak now, they really don't know exactly what is happening in Gaza, just a few meters away, separated by a wall. They don't know. They have got that propaganda machinery which tells lies, and they will always go away with it. Okay? That's number 2. Number 3, it's a colonial organization, a colonial civilization. I mean, everybody has said it. Okay? Dr. Yusuf clearly demonstrated it. All right? But we also know that they are all over the world. All right? It is the Americans in Iraq, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Kenya, in Djibouti, in everywhere. This is a characteristic of those people. And what we are dealing with in Israel right now is colonial. It's a colonial aspect. Number 4, this civilization is very selfish. Very, very selfish. You may want to know, many of you, that they have, nowadays they don't talk about justice. Right? In a philosophical sense. They don't talk about justice. They don't pursue justice. No. What do they pursue? What do they push? Human rights doctrine. But you all know the human rights doctrine, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was declared in 1948 when Israel was born. To this date has never solved that problem. You understand? So it is selfish. Human rights are not anything to do with you and me who are not whites. Human rights are for them alone. Yes, it is for them alone. Otherwise, you know, what would prevent the human rights doctrine to be invoked? For 75 years, it is as old. They are twins with this oppressor, with this human rights abuser. They are twins. It has never worked anywhere. Even when they talk about, you know, democracy and all those values, they are not meant for us, who are non-white. It's a racist organization, a racist civilization. All right? You look at the histories of other genocides that we have looked at, okay? Where they have been reluctant to act as much as fast as they could. In Rwanda, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Myanmar, among the Rohingya, the Uyghurs in China, in South Africa, you know, and all through the colonial period, it is genocide. So these are characteristics that are not shared with any other civilization. I know somebody would want to say, but you see, Muslims have also fought wars. Yes, fighting a war is different from using weapons of mass destruction and annihilation of infrastructure, babies, everything. This is unprecedented. But that's the civilization we're dealing with. You know, no other civilization has capacity to be destructive, has capacity or enjoys, all right, the feeling of aggression, the feeling of no respect for life, human life. I want to read you something. I couldn't share my video here, but there's this gentleman, he was, I think, a general, David Belavier, who said this about, after the Iraqi war. He said he was being given an honor, a medal of honor, all right, after you know, Iraq. He said, our military cannot be mistaken for a cable news gab-fest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for, who you are worshiping, what you worship, or who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died, or if you know who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that would be wise to avoid if you know what is good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. You don't want war with the United States of America. There is one thing I can promise you, so God help me. Come, someone else will raise your sons and daughters. And all the people in that audience gave him a standing ovation. This is what they believe in. This is how they describe themselves in terms of violence. They can't speak peace. You know? They can't speak reconciliation. They don't speak about living together harmoniously. Everywhere they go, it's occupation. Military bases, Iraq, Syria, name it. Even in Nicaragua, everywhere, all over the world. This is the kind of civilization we're dealing with. Now, Israel in the Middle East is their representative. Now, when we talk of the UN, when you talk of the ICJ, when you talk of the international law, when you talk of the human rights, when you talk of all these kind of things, instruments and law books, we need to bear that in mind. That these people are not going to back down. They won't back down. That's why Netanyahu is saying, well, I don't care whether them Gazans die. All right? He switched off water. He switched off electricity. Switched off food supply, fuel, warm clothing, medicine. Thank God these Israeli people don't have control over oxygen. They would have switched it off also. When you deny people these kind of basic needs, what are you doing? You're condemning them to die. You don't only deny them that and leave them freely walking in their, biggest open prison, but you keep bombing them. Tell them bomb from the north, go to the south, you bomb the south. Now, this is the kind of thing. This is what we need to address. All right? So humanitarian aid is a very obvious, concept. All right? These are material, logistical assistance to people who need help. It's usually short term, and as long as the disaster causing it, lasts. People who need it are usually homeless, refugees, victims of natural disaster, wars, famine, floods. But what's happening in terms of, when the court in South Africa, the NCJ, the international ICJ decided the case, or when they pronounce themselves on those, considerations, it's like not budge at all. Instead, they went on bombing, they went on refusing. It's winter. They don't care because they are violent at the core. At their very core, they are violent. They will decimate, all right, any people.
Professor, we have 5 minutes to conclude. Inshallah.
Yes, I think when the United Nations Relief and Work Agency champions this disaster in stricken areas, what do the Europeans do? They withdraw funding, to say, hell with you guys. Because, like Netanyahu says, they don't consider other people to be worth humans. I thank you. I think I'll stop there because the time is running out. Yes. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Somebody was commenting online that, the panelists are very informed. Thank you for that input. The professor, he told you that his background is that one of comparative civilizations. And indeed, it is there for everybody to see, only that we have not been critical enough to realize how bad, find a civilization that is racist, that is selfish, that is colonial.
Who counted them? I'm a student of demography, and I know. You see, I know who killed them, and how long did that so-called Holocaust, how long did it take? You see, if I bring you closer home, many people here say Idi Amin killed about 800 people. And then they say Ruwero War killed 100,000. It's a contradiction. Was never in any critical war. These people fought, and villages were devastated, but they will tell you 100,000, and they will say, 800,000. It is a contradiction. With those remarks, allow me to invite my boss and Muko, Dr. Twakaswe. He was my young brother, but we have exchanged and he has become my Muko. My young brother, Kasule Twaha, the director, Kampala campus, Islamic University in Uganda, to take us through the next segment, or the last segment of this workshop, if I can use the word, where we are trying to open our minds on issues that pertain to humanity, issues of humanity. That is very critical. Somebody has commented online that these people are informed. What do you expect? What do you expect? We are Muslims. Many people are still in the dream. They think we don't have this information. That's why sometimes when we challenge them, they keep mum. That's why I have a saying that goes, I am envious to ignorant people these days. Very envious. They are very lucky. When they sleep, they sleep. When they go to bed, they will sleep. Nothing to bother them. Bring any food, whether it is sweet, whether it's good for them, they will eat and enjoy. They have nothing to worry about. But for you, you pick food, you are bringing it to the mouth, this idea now comes, will you eat? By the time you put the food in the mouth, it's already cold, and you say, food is not good, you leave it there. You go to bed, make a mistake and wake up at midnight for one reason or another, or after midnight, you will not sleep again until morning because thoughts keep coming. But for the other one, he sleeps. Dr. Kasule, sir, can you please proceed?
How they were doing work under the organization UMIA. So I want to really thank you for that, and I want to say thank you for the audience which is here and my fellow panelists for the educative messages that you have so far talked about. The war is going on. The genocide is happening, and everybody can attest to that because we are all following what is happening in the news, and we are also being able to see the images from the war zone. So if somebody is on TikTok, on WhatsApp, or any of these other social media handles, for sure you have had your own feel of what is happening to those people. Sometimes we cry with them, sometimes we pray for them, sometimes we despair, and we really don't know how these individuals are actually going to get out of this kind of situation. But as the war is going on, there are a lot of narratives as well, which describe what is going on as far as the conflict is concerned. And some people are young, others don't know the history, others don't want to basically delve into, maybe they don't have the time, let me say, to go and look at where things are coming from. So in this session today, in this workshop, in this discussion, we try to put together our understanding collectively about what is going on. Now, I know that I am going to be talking about what we call the talking points in this conflict, especially those talking points that are coming from the Western world, which is the most powerful, actor, and their ally in the war zone, which is Israel, definitely, as we are talking about it here. Council Ali made it quite clear for us that we need to look at it broadly, and I agree with him. In fact, the actor is not just Israel. We all know that actors are thousands of miles away. The most important actors, actually, they are not even in the region. They are thousands and thousands of miles away. But there is something called talking points. I don't know whether the audience is used to that. But what do we mean when we say people are using talking points? Talking points refer to carefully crafted messages or statements which are often used either by politicians or by interest groups to convey their opinions, to convey their positions, to put across their arguments. So that's what you call a talking point. People carefully craft a message or a statement, and they use the media to continuously broadcast that kind of message or statement. And the intention is to be able to portray or to give a specific kind of position. So these talking points are an essential tool for shaping narratives. When you want to give a certain narrative, you create talking points and you repetitively broadcast those talking points. So in this particular war, which is happening, and of course it has been happening for so many years, the Israel side, together with their backers, have crafted these statements. And for sure, I know that most of you have heard these particular statements. So we want to respond to these particular talking points in a manner that makes them clearly understood to the majority of us, so that we are not taken for a ride because somebody is talking a certain statement and you think it is a valid statement. And I also want to thank Professor Kasule, who said you are really in a race with a very deceptive civilization. So many of the times when they make statements and messages, they don't care about truth. They simply care about what they want you to know. And that is what they are going to basically emphasize. Whether it is true or not is really not the point. Now, one of the talking points in this particular conflict for a very long time has been this statement: Israel has a right to defend itself. I'm sure everybody in this audience has heard that particular thing. The purpose of this statement, if you listen to it, now I am looking behind the statement. I don't want to just consume it. Why is this something which is so used often and very repetitive? Whether you are listening to Western politicians, whether you are listening to Western media, whether you are listening to Western academicians, any type of scuffle that happens in this region, you will see somebody popping up from the the White House, and start saying Israel has a right to defend itself. Now, this statement is a well-crafted statement. It is a loaded statement. It intends to portray an image that Israel is under attack, and therefore it is only acting in self-defense. So many times, forget about October 7, many times, whether it is in Masjid al-Aqsa, whether it is settler violence in West Bank, wherever it is, you will find a lot of times when either the IDF or the settler, violent actors in different parts of this area, once they come up and there is a small scuffle, small, big, some people have died here and there, and there is need to address that. The first statement from the American president, from European leaders, is Israel has a right to defend itself. So these people who are in law will tell you a lot of things about, self-defense. I am only going to say a snapshot on that. But the important issue here is there is a hidden idea here that Israel is a victim. Israel is a victim, and somebody else is the aggressor. Therefore, whenever you hear things coming from this part of the world, focus on Israel's right to self-defense. Now, how do we respond? My brother Yusuf started here and told us about a colonial industry, as it was basically perpetrated by the Western world. So Israel is a settler colonial state. Everybody knows that. Israel is an occupying power over the Palestinian people. It is the one which has got authority, as Ali has been mentioning. They control all the borders, the land, the sea, the communication, the movements. So these people have got perfect control over the Gaza area. Israel has imposed a blockade over Gaza for the last 17 years. And I have also heard a lot of commentaries. Under this blockade, Gaza is considered to be an open-air prison for 2.3 million people. What does it mean, open-air prison? Because people can't move out. If they choose that you'll go out, then you go out with their permission. If they say no, you can't go out. So if your movement is restricted, then that is imprisonment. Now, under international law, and the lawyers are in here, self-defense doesn't apply in the context of a military occupation. You can't be occupying people, and militarily, moreover, and then say you are defending yourself. It doesn't make sense in terms of law. On the contrary, under the law, the occupier has a responsibility to protect the people they are occupying. That is what it should be. So rather than those people telling you Palestinians have a right to be protected, they tell you Israel has a right to do what? To defend itself. And also, there is all this statement we have been hearing over and over again, the war between Gaza and Israel. Logically, it is also incorrect. It's actually absurd. Because the way that particular part of the world is structured, because Gaza is under the full control of Israeli government and forces and whatsoever, it is part and parcel of Israel de facto. It's like part of it, except that it is a ghetto which has been put aside and it is denied many, many things. So imagine if somebody told you, suppose somewhere in Uganda here, maybe Masaka, let me use Masaka as an example because I marry from there, you know. They will not be angry with me. Suppose there are some people who are disturbing the government of Uganda in Masaka as rebels or whatever it is. Is it a fair thing for you to say Uganda is at war with Masaka? Can you say something like that? Uganda is at war with Masaka, so there is a war between Uganda and Masaka. Or that Uganda is defending itself against Masaka. So this kind of things is what we hear all the time. They are deceptive, they are lies, they are just messages which are being, broadcast to feed our mind on them so that we can always feel like, yes, the Israel people are just defending themselves. I think I wanted to use this opportunity to highlight, the deception, but the real meaning also behind this particular talking point, which is the most abundant talking point in the conflict today. The second one is, it is almost sealed. Everybody has been made to believe, and this is really something that is repeated all over the place. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Now, when groups or individuals are labeled, and I want also to give the meaning of this kind of thing, because this is a label. Somebody simply labels you a terrorist, or they label you a fundamentalist, they label you anything. So the people who want to give you a label have a purpose. Now, Hamas has been labeled as a terrorist organization. The most important goal behind this label is to shape the public attitude towards this organization. How should the public understand this thing called Hamas? By the powerful countries as a terrorist organization, it therefore means that everybody is going to be cautious. You can't relate, you can't sympathize, you can't advocate for justice, because everybody is going to say, but how can you be talking about this organization in this way when you know that it is a terrorist organization? Who has labeled it a terrorist organization? It is Israel, United States of America, the European Union. They always use this label as a weapon against the groups they don't like. It's not just a Hamas issue. If they don't like you here today, Imam Kasozi, they can say, Umia is a terrorist organization. And that's it. They have designated you. And people are going to start keeping away from you because you have been labeled. And a public attitude has been formed about who you are. It's not just a description. It is something intended to shape how the public perceive this particular organization. Now let me give you my response. Hamas, by the way, is an acronym. It means Harakat al-Muwaqama al-Islamiyya. Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, which means Islamic Resistance Movement. And Hamas in Palestine, in those Palestinian territories, is a legitimate political party. It participates in democratic processes. And the last time they had one, Hamas actually won in Gaza. That is why until today, in this particular fight, the IDF and the people in Israel are saying we cannot accept to finish a war when Hamas is in power. Now, is Hamas imposing itself on the people of Gaza? No, they elected it. In fact, in all public opinion polls, they show you that the rating of Hamas is very, very high. So Hamas, at least this is my opinion, is not a terrorist organization. I want to call them what they call themselves. It is a resistance of movement. And to understand why resistance movements emerge, you have to study the specific history of those particular societies. But this issue of Western world labeling resistance movements as terrorist organizations is not something that only happened yesterday. They did it, by the way, with the ANC of South Africa. They said, United States and the United Kingdom, they designated ANC, which was fighting apartheid in South Africa, as a terrorist organization. Later on, when the liberation happened, then the former terrorists became icons. So, during the Nazi occupation of France, the French resistance was also designated as a terrorist movement by the occupiers, and these were the Nazis in Germany. Therefore, it is not a surprise that Israel and its allies refer to Palestinian resistance movements as terrorist groups. Do not fall for this Western propaganda. For me, I understand Hamas as a legitimate resistance movement. And in fact, when you are occupied, when you are colonized, even under the law, you have a right to defend. You have a right to fight for your own liberation. So somebody is trying also to send a message to you that these Palestinians, whatever they do, they shouldn't be fighting the occupation, because those who are fighting the occupation are terrorist organizations. Now, how are they supposed to fight the occupation? By negotiation? So they should negotiate themselves out of the occupation, and colonialists, where did that work? In which country did that work? It has never worked. So Hamas, to me, and a few of my friends,
thank you.
We consider it as a resistance movement, and it has the legitimate right to fight the occupation. You don't want people to fight you as an occupier, lift the occupation. It's as simple as that. But you want to maintain the occupation, and you want to say everybody who fights this occupation is a terrorist. Okay. The third issue, which I also want to say as a talking point, specifically it has been very common in this particular war which is running right now. Hamas is using civilian, or human beings or civilians as human shields. And also they have been saying it is hiding under civilian infrastructure. This is another issue that has been said over and over again. The Israeli generals in the army and the politicians believe in the approach of massive collective punishment. This is actually their belief. Professor Omar was telling us about the violence of their civilization. Their approach, their tactics in fighting war is massive collective punishment to all the Palestinian people. This implies they can kill so many people, and they can completely obliterate their infrastructure. This objective, or the objective of this approach, is to make it extremely costly for the Palestinian resistance to ever think about attacking Israel. So once you attack and kill, as the statistics have been said, 12,000, they will come to Gaza, carpet bomb all the homes, all the schools, all the universities, all the hospitals, everything, and they kill thousands and thousands of people. This is the philosophy. Make it so costly that the next time these people will have to think twice whether they should come back to fight you. This is their philosophy. Therefore, when they are doing this carpet bombing and killing and mercilessly, decimating this particular part of the world, those of us who are telling them, you see, civilians are dying, blah, 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 for them, they don't mind. This is actually what they want. And then they have to find an excuse. They have to tell you why that is happening. They say, you see, we don't want to kill civilians. For us, we are targeting Hamas terrorists. But what is Hamas doing? It is hiding under civilian infrastructure, in the hospitals, in the schools, and so on and so forth. Then they will tell you, Hamas is using civilians as human shields. Therefore, we can't do anything about that. It is Hamas which is responsible for these deaths. It's not us. And so on and so forth. How do we respond to that? Let me give you two, and I'll be winding up, Imam. The truth is that Israel and all its backers have no concern for Palestinian lives at all. They have made it clear in their statement that their intention is to punish all the people. And these are some of their statements, which you have also heard from political leaders and generals. They have said, the president of Israel, called Isaac Herzog, said they are all responsible. There is no innocent civilian in Gaza. So when they kill them, do you really get surprised? According to them, they are all responsible. They are not innocent. Another statement is, we are fighting human animals. Yoav Gallant, the defense minister. So these are not human beings. Do you care if cockroaches die? You don't care. So when you dehumanize them, then you can kill them at will. Then they also say, as Ali was mentioning here, no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything will be closed. Again, the defense minister of Israel. So Israel's intelligence ministry also authored a document recommending moving all the Gaza's civilian population into Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. So you can clearly see that the question of people being below, Hamas being under the civilian infrastructure, blah, blah, is really not the point. The point is in what they are saying. They don't want you there. Either they kill you or they move you out of this place. And lastly, my moderator, there is also this usual statement. Israel is facing an existential threat. Israel is facing an existential threat. So there is a common reference to the Hamas Charter of 1988, in which they claim that the Hamas's stated objective is the total destruction of Israel. Now, the truth is, in 1988, in the initial charter of Hamas, the resistance movement did not want to negotiate peace with Israel. They didn't want to negotiate peace. They rejected peace negotiations, and this is what is always mentioned as Hamas's definitive opposition to the existence of Israel. But from the year 2004, Hamas leaders have repeatedly and consistently stated that they will accept a peace agreement if Israel will pull back to the 1967 borders. And everybody knows whatever peace movements and negotiations have been happening is talking about the 1967 borders. Yet the Israeli Prime Minister, very recently, when he was on the platform of the United Nations, displayed a map of what they call the New Middle East, and the whole of Palestinian territory was already consumed by Israel. In other words, that entire country now is Israel. So he even picked a pen and drew a line passing through all the countries from Saudi Arabia into Israel, into other countries, and said, we are now envisaging our entry into a new Middle East where we are living in peace with each other. Now, if a prime minister of the country who knows that there is a dispute on land in the area he controls who has been pretending all along that a two-state solution is one of the things that they want to do, can now come in front of the United Nations, on the platform of the United Nations, and say, this is Israel, without any exception, without even showing that there is a future Palestine somewhere. Now, who wants to annihilate the other? Israel has got real power to annihilate. These people, you can say they have an objective, but they don't even have the power to do anything to you. But for you have the power to erase them, you settle on their land, you kill them in thousands, you carpet bomb their country, and so on and so forth. So I think, my dear brothers and sisters, with these particular comments, I wanted to let you know that we are hearing a lot of things. And it is possible that that Western propaganda can make our opinion, to be exactly what they are trying to make us believe. But it is important that we look at the statements they make, which they call talking points, and we read behind them, so that we can actually understand and be in a position to come up with the proper conclusions. I thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Of course, the leaders may not, but the population on the ground, they are. Then the question asked about how can we donate? Somebody even asked online, financially. I always tell people, if you want to donate financially, now you have seen the organization here, the two organizations that have organized this, you can reach out to them. We know how to get whatever support you have, especially support in our case area must be money, because the easy one to smuggle you where you want it to be. Otherwise, if you carry food, what will not go. But we know how we can make contributions. Some of us have already made, and these donations or support has reached. So if you are convinced that you have something to donate, go to Al-HIDAAYA Foundation office. Present what you want to present. Or look for your Omia office. Present what you want to present. We know we shall use our other means to ensure that it reaches out. Sometimes these things are done silently because many of you are still young and you are yearning to go to Europe and the States. If you are put under administrative processing like some of us, you will find it sometimes hard. But for us, some of us don't buy because we don't eat from them, we feed from here. And two, one time I told one person from the US that, my first time to go to the US, I was 40 years old. The first time, in 1999. But I was living. I was living. So, when you convince yourself that you are not a survivor, you can easily fit into this work we are doing. But if you become a survivor, it will be very hard for you to participate in some of the activities. One time asked me to define for me who a survivor is. Let us, please, people behind the machines, can we have that clip play so that we let our key speakers make their presentations. Thank you.
The highest rate of civilian slaughter in the 21st century. Israel killing more than 10,000 children in what UNICEF has called a graveyard of children. 100 days of dropping 2,000-pound bombs, hundreds of times on the very spaces families were crammed to seek shelter. Murdering them in an ever-shrinking killing cage in sheer cruelty and deliberate destruction of life. 100 days of burning children's flesh down to the bone with illegal white phosphorus, and destroying 400,000 homes to rubble and forcibly displacing 2 million people, 90% of the population. Of bombing 320 schools so children in Gaza have no access to an education, ensuring lost generations. Destroying the healthcare system and decimating nearly every hospital, bombing them with patients in them and systematically targeting 637 doctors and healthcare professionals, an entire class of medicine, while injuring 60,000 so that they succumb to their wounds and die slow, painful deaths. It's not enough to massacre them in their homes, but to massacre them in their hospital beds. 100 days of bombing bakeries and purposefully burning food while denying aid trucks in, so an entire civilian population of 2.3 million is mass starved. 80% of those starving in the world in Gaza, 9 out of 10 people in Gaza, sleeping without eating, forcibly displaced from their homes, children's bodies crushed beneath rubble, soldiers laughing and filming themselves as they press the button to wipe out entire blocks on children's heads as though human lives are a game that they play. The sadism and sense of impunity and hatred for innocent life, knowing no likeness in our lifetime. 100 days of them telling the world what they are doing in horrifying language, followed by action at the highest levels and across society. Language that we've heard in the worst horrors of human history. Speaking of annihilating of people and human animals. And that is why the world is marching with Palestine. Because it's impossible to know the truth as a human being of conscience and to uphold this for human life. 100 days of the first genocide in history, where its victims are broadcasting their own destruction in real time in the desperate, so far vain hope that the world might do something. This can never be self-defense. Nothing can justify this. This is genocide on a population that's been subjected to 75 years of annihilation, of ethnic cleansing and vicious apartheid on their land in Gaza and in the West Bank, and Nakba that has never ended. 56 years of brutal, illegal occupation and violent oppression, of 17 years of a deadly siege in the world's largest concentration camp, of people denied their rights to exist for the past 75 years, denied their rights to live in dignity and in freedom, of people persecuted for decades, massacred in the thousands, held hostage in the thousands before October 7th, and every day after October 7th, tortured in indefinite military detention without trial or charge, including thousands of children suffering pogroms of their villages, the destruction of their homes and schools, the uprooting of their olive trees and their history and their families and their livelihoods.
Thank you very much. For being participating. I think there are a few issues that we have raised for our panelists. Somebody who asked the council that who determines whether it is a genocide or not, because we talked about the Genocide Convention. And someone else was, saying that why are they talking about only Israel and not about the other countries that were formed out of the greater Palestine, like Jordan, like Syria. But I think that was actually answered. That it was only the Palestinians, but it was only the Palestinians that were left stateless after that partition that took place. So we'll have maybe 4 minutes for each of the panelists to address some of the issues that are raised. Good enough, some were contributions and comments. And where there are questions, I will start with the council, Ali, Kankaka, in 4 minutes, and then we will also give us your parting shot as far as this subject is concerned. Then we shall have Dr. Boakadin here I don't know, Professor Umar, whether he's still online, and Dr. Yusuf will also want to give you time to see to it that you give us your parting shot in view of the questions and the comments that were raised by the participants. Okay, that's very good. Council Kabaya, you take the shot first.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you, all the panelists. Whether it is a genocide or not, whether there is a genocide, it is the law. The law has defined what constitutes genocide. Those of you who were in the house when I was making the presentation, I took you to what is prohibited. You see, the Genocide Convention does not just punish, it prohibits first. Then it punishes. It is so it describes activities that constitute genocide, killing of people, causing mental, physical harm, with the intention of afflicting harm to a group, transferring them, subjecting them to conditions that would lead to mental, physical harm, and so many of those activities that follow, even being an accomplice to those activities. So that as to, I think the question someone wanted maybe, is there someone who can definitively, yes, in the international forum, for example, at an international level, that's why you have the ICJ, you have a South African case there. It is not yet determined, but at least according to the preliminary findings, they are saying what is happening there. It is definitely, it speaks, it walks, it breathes like a genocide. And in international law, we say genocide is a crime of all crimes. There is no bigger crime above genocide. That's why in my presentation I told you that Israel and its supporters have breached all the rules in the rule book of international law. By the time you are charged with genocide, there is nothing else left for you to be charged with. I don't know whether I've been clear enough. Now, some issues, I think Dr. Kasure and the members were discussing about self-defense and some questions. Self-determination is at the core of international law. And that is what now fits into the talking points that Dr. Kasure was talking about. The very existence of international law is premised on self-determination, the right of the people to rule themselves. That is the basis of the existence of states. So if you do not have a state, it is your right to fight to have one, because you can't have self-rule, self-determination where there is no territory to talk about. And in my presentation, I was able to highlight, if you can remember one thing, that the biggest mischief that came out of the Second World War consensus when we created the current order, the world order, was the creation of the Islamic State in a place where it had not existed by displacing the Palestinians, and then we do not corresponding with, they did not correspondingly create the Palestinian state. It was deliberate. That's my view. And it has remained deliberate. Someone was talking about the Hamas and all that. Those are scarecrows. You see, before Hamas came into play, Hamas was formed in 1987, and then in 1988 it formed, that's when the charter that Dr. Kasure was talking about was promulgated. Why was the Palestinian state not created? PLO, Palestinian Authority, was there. It was using peace, and it is still there. By the way, someone may think that it is only Hamas. The Ramallah, that side, it is the Palestinian Authority. It is using peace. Are the conditions any better? Do they have self-determination? So if the answer is no, then this idea of Hamas is a non-necessary excuse, I think. Hamas only came to the fore in 2006. That's when they won a democratic election organized by the Palestinian Authority. They didn't come through for violence. They won a democratic election. Immediately, Israel, with its backers, established a blockade. Then the violence that you see since 2006 to date was naturally there. And I think there was a presentation, I think it is either Dr. Kasule or Professor Kasule, they are all Kasule, and they are all my friends, about the Rubin, I think it was the Imam Kasozi, quoting the Professor Mazuri that the violence, terrorism is warfare for the weak. Definitely in the face of Israeli military machinery, what else do you use? You see them using stones, everything at their disposal. Lastly, I have heard Imam Kasozi cautioning the young men and women in this gathering that if you want to go to Europe, please say less. You see, that scarecrow is being used by those who want to perpetuate this criminality. Are we saying that those who go to Europe, they live a better life than we do? The people seated here, I'm glad that I have worked with them for a long time. I started my work at the university. These were my bosses. I have never tried to go outside, but I have traveled. But I will not allow someone to stop me from speaking, expressing my opinion, because he or she can deny me a visa. If I can't go to US, I have gone there, they have never stopped me. In Europe, going to the next month, if they want, they can stop me. I will come back and eat my matoke. But when we are dealing, ask yourself, you saw these pictures, ask yourself, is your going to Europe more important than the destiny of those young children, those innocent people being murdered? The Jews, when they were being murdered, were they murdered in the Middle East? Were they killed in Africa? They were killed in Europe. So why should you be intimidated by a threat to deny you entry into a civilization which Professor Kasole said is essentially violent, essentially criminal in nature, and racist at the core? Now, before I take a leave, I want to say one thing, that genocide being a crime of all crimes, and knowing very well that there is no way Israel would have, or any nation on this planet, leave alone Israel, can perpetuate genocide without either the trust and positive support of the power that be, or criminal silence of those very power. The academics in this room and on the platform, I want to leave you with a question which has been disturbing me. Is all of this being done in the name of Israel, or Israel was simply a project, as someone put it? Is it a pawn? And therefore we stop addressing Israel, we address the chess master.
I think two quick responses on some of the questions that came in. One of them was one of the things I talked about as a talking point, where they say that Israel is facing an existential threat from Hamas and other groups. Yes, of course. I think you wanted, the questioner wanted me to go into charter issues and so on. Those things are online. Just Google. Google the Hamas Charter, you will read it, all right? What they are trying to tell us, what they want you to believe, what they want always to insist on, is that, you see, Hamas wrote it in its charter, that there is no Israel. Okay, let us for a moment say they did that. But between Hamas and Israel, who actually is existentially threatening the other? You know, this is really the question you have to put in mind, because the current war alone tells you that Israel's objective is to annihilate Palestine. That's why they are pushing them to go to Egypt, and they are making this propaganda and also killing them en masse so that they can make them feel this place is unlivable, we just have to leave. So, I think I don't have much on that particular issue, you can read, but I don't want the biased narrative that, you know, this is the stated objective of Hamas, therefore Israel is in such fear because some document said something. You understand? This is just a, you know, family way of reasoning. The other issue is Muslim states seem to be supporting Israel. Okay, I think Imam talked about it here when he was winding up. There is a difference between the leaders of the Muslim world and the population in the Muslim world. So when you hear that the countries in the Middle East have normalized with Israel, even up to now they are saying Saudi Arabia is going to normalize with Israel. In fact, the leader of Saudi Arabia perhaps wants to do that for whatever reasons he knows. Does that mean the Saudis have abandoned the cause of the Palestinian people? No, they haven't. So I think at some point leaders can do something, but it does not represent, you know, the majority of the Muslim world. We are here today in Uganda. Many of us here are Muslims, and we associate with the cause of those people, irrespective of what our government thinks. Similarly, many others in those countries, they also support the Israelis. So what can be done? My colleagues have already mentioned some things. But I also want to throw in this thing which we have not talked about a lot here for today. But it is a tool which is also used by Israel and its backers in order to keep people's mouths shut. The idea of anti-Semitism. I think you hear that also a lot, most of the time. Once you talk about Israel, or when you talk about Zionism, which Shaban was mentioning here, once you try to criticize anything related with Israel, they will say you are anti-Semitic. Therefore, you are a person who is engaging yourself in hate speech. Let me say that in addition to what my colleagues have been saying, we should not stop talking just because there are these scarecrows. We must keep talking about this matter. The more we talk about it, the more we write about it. If one day, inshallah, we have capacity, we shall also demonstrate. We have got to get the momentum running into one action after the other, because that is what everybody thinks that is important in order to show the global human consensus about the fact that what is going on is unacceptable. The people of Palestine deserve better. I have something which might sound a bit radical also. You see, we have a number of things have already been tried as well. Peace has been tried. The so-called negotiations in all kind of peaceful accords to establish this and that. Every negotiation collapses at some point. Why? Because again, the real objective of Israel is not that there should be a state for Palestine. So they will negotiate for the next 100 years and they will not get it. If really we say that negotiation is the pathway. The right of the Palestinian people to self-determination cannot be a gift of the Israeli society. It is a right of those particular people. It has got to be earned. And therefore, the idea of negotiations doesn't seem to work, and I don't really think that it is going to work. The legal route via South Africa and so on is now under trial. Most of the time, whenever they talk about law, they only talk about law selectively. If it is something that is in favor of Israel, then they'll talk about the international law. If they must apply international law to support the Palestinian people, then they will ignore it, they will use force. I have a thinking that maybe this particular war, and Alhidaaya was talking about how Palestinians have managed to actually put up a good show. As a matter of fact, the war that we are talking about has been fought for now close to 4 months. Hamas fighting who? Fighting Israel, fighting the United States, fighting the EU, and all other backers. Our brothers there have actually tried to put up a meaningful battle. I have a feeling that Israel has going to be strategically defeated. Because if they don't defeat it, the arrogance will not stop. They will go out of this one. You remember when they just finished this ICJ and the ruling was put up immediately. They came out arrogantly and talked about how, they are going to continue doing what they are doing. The provisional measures notwithstanding. So this arrogance and, the sense of feeling that they are above each and everything will not stop in Israel until they have really suffered some kind of strategic defeat. So for me, I would like to suggest, and I said it's a bit radical, but I don't know whether people will like it. The war, I understand its effect, but the war, if it continues to inflict pain, some amount of pain on Israel, it should go on. And in fact, the people who are in the surrounding areas, like the Houthis, who have also come up to say, we are going to fight in defense of Israel, they should actually go ahead. Because this is what happens. Yes, in defense of Palestine. The Americans have brought all their ships and they talk about other equipment and made a lot of propaganda about the fact that there should be no escalation. Well, because they fear the escalation is going definitely to destroy the objective that they are fighting. They want to concentrate it in Gaza, defeat the people, annihilate them, send them out of Gaza, and the game is over. You are the people who are giving weapons to Israel. And then you are telling everybody else, we don't want escalation, please don't come in, don't join the war. So the Houthis actually doing a great job. They should fight them. In fact, I thought that Hezbollah would be deeply into the war by now. I'm a bit disappointed. So I would like to see that all the fighting groups actually open different war fronts, because that is the only way you have to stretch those who are concentrating all the effort on a small group in Gaza. And when they do that, they will come to strategic defeat of Israel. That's what happened in Afghanistan. They were not interested in leaving Afghanistan alone until those people fought them and strategically defeated them, and they walked away and they left the country in the hands of the Taliban. So, some idea here, but I know some people fear it. So, I want to really root for the argument, like Yusuf was mentioning. He wants to put different forms of argument on the matter. We might need to be thinking about the fact that this continuation, as long as the Hamas and other fighters have the capacity to continue fighting, they shouldn't be discouraged. Because the more they fight the enemy, the more they expose the weakness of that enemy. And inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will give them victory with all the other things that we are doing to help them. I want to thank you now in my party message as organizers. I really want to thank you so much, our dear participants who have come into this particular discussion today. We have spent over 4 hours in this room talking about a very important issue from all angles: humanistic angle, rights and responsibilities to our brothers, and so on and so forth. So we really feel that you have given this a great presence and a great discussion as well. Our members who have been online, thank you so much. We want to thank our co-organizers, Uganda Muslim Youth Assembly, and especially all those people who financed this particular campaign. We have looked for money, and alhamdulillah, there were people willing to say, if it is for this purpose, we are going to put money here. We also want to thank Hotel Africana, management, and the operations people who allowed us this whole moment to come and do this particular function here. We shall never forget all the contributions that have been made by everybody towards this function. But as we have mentioned, we really want the momentum to grow over this. If you have had it here, go back to your local mosque and continue talking to those who are down there. Unless the conversation keeps speeding, inshallah we shall reach to another level at some point to come. Jazakumullah khair. We are very, very grateful, and we hope inshallah we shall have other opportunities to meet on this and other matters of our community. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Brother Tony Mamsentongo to give us dua for brothers in there and also glory to our police. Now,
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. In my dua with the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he is quoted as having said that if a person, a Muslim, dies without having participated in jihad, or at least wishing that I wish I had the ability to participate in jihad, he dies with the semblance of nifaq in his heart. So on that basis, I want to say that we give our solidarity to our brothers and sisters in Palestine and in every other place. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rescues them from the enemy and the Jews, the Israeli state, and their supporters, America and the others. ربنا إننا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا إننا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا إننا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. اللهم انصرنا 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 على المنافقين. اللهم انصرنا على المنفعين. اللهم انصرنا على الظالمين. اللهم انصرنا على الظالمين. اللهم انصرنا على المنافقين. اللهم انصرنا على الأشرار. اللهم انصرنا على السفهاء. اللهم انصرنا على الطواغيت. اللهم انصرنا على الطواغيت. اللهم انصرنا على الطواغيت. اللهم انصرنا على رؤساء وعلماء السوء يا عزيز يا قدير. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل نعم المولى ونعم النصير حسبنا الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلنا وهو رب العرش العظيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم يا رحمن يا رحيم الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر الخالق والبارئ المصور الغفار الوهاب الرزاق الفتاح العليم القادر الخافض الرافع المعز المذل الحكم العدل اللطيف يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم يا رحمن يا رحيم ارحمنا اللهم يا منان من علينا اللهم يا كريم أكرمنا اللهم يا فتاح افتح علينا افتح لنا وافتح علينا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم يا ناصر انصرنا وانصر إخواننا المسلمين والمجاهدين في فلسطين وفي كل مكان. اللهم انصرنا وانصر إخواننا المجاهدين والمسلمين في فلسطين وفي كل مكان.